Hey guys, this is a mini shad shank redemption, and I tied this fly after a brown trout puked up a small shad, and I really wanted something to imitate it and also to articulate and move like crazy in the water. So for this fly, which is only about 2 inches in length, it has two different articulations. One off the back, which is off of this 6 millimeter shank here, and then the other, of course, which is between the Daiichi 2460 size number 6 and the Gamakatsu wide gap size number 4. As far as materials, extremely straightforward. Have some hen feathers in the back, have a little bit of flash not only in the back but for the lateral line. Have some laser dub in multiple colors, basically white and lavender. And then in the white across the back, both on both hooks, I'm using a UV lavender again to give that back a little bit of differentiation between the white belly itself. Up front, I have a brush from Just Add Water, some 5 millimeter eyes, and then across the back, tying it all together, is some minnow shimmer fringe. So, without further ado, let's get tying. Alright, so let's get tying. I'm going to use laser dub in white and ice dub in lavender. In the laser dub, what you're going to notice is I'm going to make 4 different sections, 4 tops and 4 bottoms. And the first 3 are going to go on the back hook, and the other thicker section is going to go on the front hook. So one for the front. And all I'm trying to do is create a little bit of a taper, right? Going from lighter to more. And I use the lavender to create that blue back. Like if you take a look at a herring, it has that. And this just adds additional highlight, and it really helps the fly come to life in the water. All right, so it's time to tie the tail. The tail itself is going to be tied on a 6 millimeter shank, and you can use a tail shank if you want. For thread, I'm using Viva's 100, and I'm just grabbing 2 hen neck variant feathers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to strip the excess marabou or whatever that excess fuzz is off of the backs, and I've lined the feathers up so they're aligned. And next is a really cool trick. If you have never flattened a feather using a pair of pliers, you gotta do it. Feathers themselves are naturally round, and when you take a pair of pliers and you squish them flat, it allows you just to lay them right along the side of the hook, or in this case the shank, and lay them down. So you notice I put them facing each other, and they're also on the same side of the shank. It doesn't make a difference if you put it on opposite sides. I find it to be a real pain in the ass and in just a waste of time and effort. So you can put them on the same side, you're going to get the same effect. Next, head-drawn flashabou, lateral scale. This is the skinny stuff. It works great. You know I'm a fan of lateral scale. When it gets in the water, looks amazing. Trim it just beyond the end of the feathers, and yeah, it'll just sit and go just fine. So back to the neck, gonna do the exact same thing. Gonna strip off the excess material, give it a clip, and now I'm gonna tie it in and going to wrap it forward. So I just got my little electrical pliers. You can get them anywhere. They work great. And now I'm just gonna wrap forward, bringing the material back. And the idea here is just to create a little resistance at the front of the tail so that when the water gets around it, it pushes those feathers back and just makes that tail kick and move like crazy in the water. And it does. It just looks awesome. So I'm just going to tie it off real quick. And you guys know I'm a huge fan of super glue. I'm just going to wrap it with that Viva's 100 a couple times. Grab the Zap-A-Gap in medium, hit the thread, do some wraps, and then I'm going to take the old razor blade and cut it off, and the tail's done. All right, grab the mono. This is Orvis 20 pound, and I basically just cut off about a 4-inch piece, threading it through, putting a little tension on it to put a little bend in it. Grabbing my favorite hook, a Daiichi 2460, size number 6. Putting a base layer of thread down, it's Vivus 100. And next I'm putting that tail section on. And I've just grabbed it. I've got the mono side by side. And I'm going to leave about 1/8 of an inch gap off of the back there. So I'm going to cinch it down. I'm going to glue it into place. Remember, you're not going to have much pressure put on this. And I know I put some Zap-A-Gap thin. It's never going to come off, but you don't really have to worry about this back area too much. So next, I'm grabbing my head-drawn Flashabou lateral scale. This is 1/16 inch, and this stuff is the saltwater version. I love it. This makes such an incredible lateral line, and in the water, this just lights up and bleeds right through the laser dub. So side-by-side wraps all the way up to the front. And now I'm just going to tie it off. And I'm actually going to tie off this thread here, and I'm going to replace it with mono. The reason why I use mono is twofold. One, it acts as a protectant. If you get some sharp teeth around that lateral scale, it's not coming off, which is great. And then as we tie in the laser dub, it really makes it easy, and it doesn't make any marks. You can't see the lines, where you tied it in. The bottom section is in, and now it's time for the top. Just align those tips, put it in. And the nice thing, because we've already created a taper with the materials, you don't really have to worry about it. You just tie it in. Align those tips, put it right on the bottom, put a couple wraps in, adjust it as necessary. Notice how it looks like a V, and this is really nice because you can put the top piece right on there. Latch them both back at the same time. It just saves you some steps. Now I'm coming forward, grabbing that bottom piece, lining the tips, tying it in, adjusting, leaving it forward, grabbing that top section, lining the tips, tie it in, making sure it's on top, making sure you can see that lateral line there. Looks awesome. All right, so a little laser dub in lavender. And the reason why I do this, if you look at the side of a minnow, basically it's got a little bit of that purplish hue to it. I've got 20 or 30 strands. Just going to put it right over the side, tie it in, pull it back, lash it down. Exact same amount for the opposite side. Couple loose wraps, make sure it's on top, pull it back, tie it down. Looks good. Little Zap-A-Gap. And then we're going to hit it with the razor blade. So now what we want to do is create the taper. So I just grabbed my Velcro brush. That's nothing more than Velcro on a popsicle stick. And pull it out so the hair is straight. And what I'm doing is I'm taking a look at it. I'm making sure everything's aligned. And now I'm going to start trimming at an angle. And I'm going to taper about from 1/4 inch at the top down to 1/8. And if you're nervous, take less off to start than more. And what you want to do is create the same taper on the bottom. And that looks good. And I'll use my taperizing scissors later, basically to thin it out. But right now, it looks good as far as a taper. Time for the front hook. Gamakatsu Wide Gap number 4. This hook is amazing, incredibly sticky. The gap on it is fantastic. So grab your Orvis 20 or whatever you got for mono. Grab some A-dot glass beads. I'm using silver. You can use any color you want, maybe even a red to make it look like a gill. And just put the mono side by side. We're going to lash it down. Now this connection is really important. You want that 3/4 of an inch between the tip of that first hook and the front hook. Anything shorter, you'll get strikes. You won't be able to set the hook. It'll pop right out. Double that mono over, make sure you lash the crap out of it, and then hit it with that Zap-A-Gap or whatever super glue you have to make sure that that connection doesn't come undone. All right, time to grab my hair clip, hold everything in place, and gonna grab the lateral scale. That's 1/16 inch pearl. And I'm gonna do the exact same thing. I'm gonna make that lateral line. I want it popping through the laser dub. And you notice I don't go all the way to the front. I leave about 1/8 of an inch there. And I come right back to where the thread aligns with the hook point. So I'm grabbing the remainder of the laser dub. Gonna tie it in there. Again, make sure you lash it so it doesn't pop out. And you want the tips of the laser dub not only to be aligned, but to go all the way back to the next section. So if you look here, what I'm trying to do is make sure that it covers that gap between the two sections. If you don't, it'll look like your fly begins and ends, and you don't want that. You want it to look like one continuous fly. So anyway, pulling everything back, I'm gonna grab my laser dub in lavender here, doing the same thing, creating that little bit of a purplish hue along the side, just 20 to 30 strands on the left, now on the right. And just doing the simple couple loose wraps, pull it up on top, cinch it down, pull it back, and go right over top of it. Looks good. Velcro, right? Just to make sure that everything looks good. Give it a quick brush and give it a quick trim. And you notice I took the fly out so that I can actually look and make sure that it has that progressive taper. For the minnow back, I'm going to use some Ice Dub Shimmer Fringe in Pearl Olive and UV Blue back. This stuff is awesome. I've just trimmed about 1/16 of an inch off, and it's got maybe 20, 30 strands. Once you get it wet, you'll see this stuff just looks like a minnow back itself. And I'm just going all the way to the tail, and I'm gonna do my clip. Next, just add water. This is a 2-inch brush. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tie it in. I've taken the materials off the tip, leaving maybe, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch or so. I'm gonna spread the fibers out. Remember, this is 2 inches long, and I'm gonna taper it so that it goes from short to long, because we want the longer fibers at the back. And there's probably about 3/4 of an inch on the back. And then as I wrap forward, it'll get to about 1/2 an inch. So it's progressively larger at the back and skinnier at the front. I got about 3 to 4 different wraps of that brush on there, and now I'm just gonna clip it off. And you notice with my scissors, I put them as far up as possible not to damage the fine point. Time for a little Zap-A-Gap. Pull as many of those fibers back, put that Vivus 100 in there, and pop it off with the razor blade. It's time to create the taper. And what you'll notice I've done is I've wet the fly. And now I'm just gonna trim it into the form that I want it to look like when it's in the water. So I'm taking my time, I'm going from the back, I'm doing the belly, and then I flip it over and I do the back. This is my favorite part, using the hair dryer just to blow everything into position. And what you see is it blows, you know, that brush back and gives it that really awesome taper. Anyway, I just grabbed my taperizing scissors, I hit the minnow fringe up top, and now I'm gonna put the eyes on. So all I'm doing is I'm grabbing a little bit of Zap-A-Gap goo, and I'm gonna put a dollop on one side. I'm gonna grab my 5mm eyes from Fly Tires Dungeon, and I'm gonna put 2/3 of it above the shank, above the hook shank, and let it set. And I'm gonna flip it over, and I'm gonna do the exact same thing on the other side. Dollop a Zappa Gappa goo. Grab that 5mm eye and do your best to have them align. And if they're not perfect, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. I think eyes are more for us than anything else. Next, grab a Sharpie, black, and we're just gonna put a little bit of marking up on top, kind of to pull the whole fly together. Just think it adds a little je ne sais quoi, as they say, something special. And that looks good. Now I'm just going to grab a little Solaris, and I'm going to use some thin, hard. And the whole idea is just to lock those eyes in place so that thin goes in right behind the eyes and the fibers. And when you hit it with the torch, not once but twice, it just pulls everything, locks everything together so those eyes aren't going to come off. That's it. Hope that helped you out.